So, when you've learned Irish before, you've probably seen, certainly in spelling anyway, there's a distinction between broad and slender consonants. Often you'll see this taught as a spelling difference, so you may have, let's say, consonants that are surrounded by an A, an O, or a U be considered broad, and then anything surrounded by an I and an E to be considered slender. You also may hear mention of palatalization and velarization, but it's rarely kind of explained. Even if it is, it's very scientific, and it doesn't really tell you what to do with your mouth to kind of make those sounds. When I've seen this in some lessons, YouTube videos, books, etc. before, you often see the example of be versus bui. So the verb to be and the color yellow. And when it's explained, it's often said to just be, this kind of W sound, right, in the word for yellow, this bui, right? And otherwise I usually hear it's kind of the same, the same letter B as in English outside of that W glidey sound. But the reality is with Irish, it's not actually the case. The way you make the B sound with your mouth is actually a little bit different. And this goes for all sets of broad and slender consonants in Irish. So with this video, I wanted to give you guys some tips that I found useful for replicating these sounds. So without getting too scientific about it, let's go. So your starting point for these sounds, we'll go with the letter L. I think it's the easiest to replicate. If you are like a speaker of a Slavic language, let's say like Czech or Russian, Polish, etc., you'll probably be able to do these already. As far as I know, the broad and slender is very similar to the kind of soft and hard distinction in those languages. But if you're a native English speaker like me, you don't have as much familiarity with these sounds. So we'll start with L. First thing is what's called a velar L. And actually, luckily, we have one of these in English. Certainly in the UK and Ireland, we use it. So what you got to start off with is take any word where an L is in the middle or end of the word. Just avoid ones where L is at the start. So let's say, for example, waterfall. So you say waterfall, right? The L is at the end. What you want to do is hold that L sound, right? Waterfall. And you want to really exaggerate the sound. So waterfall, and kind of hold it and see what your mouth is doing. So you'll notice what's happening is the tip of your tongue is kind of just at your front teeth, touches your front teeth, the back of them. And almost like the back of your tongue, it almost has this kind of pressure forcing it upwards, almost like it's blocking your throat a little bit. So this kind of this kind of ol sound comes out by the end of it. And there you go. That's like a broad L in Irish pretty much, except when you actually do this the same as when we said the word waterfall, you don't have to overdo it. But for the sake of the example, I think really try exaggerate it until you get used to the sound and making it with your mouth. So that's the broad L. Maybe two kind of points around it in terms of phonetics. So it's called a dental consonant because you use your teeth to make the sound. So the tip of your tongue is against your teeth, the back of your front teeth. And it's called a velarized sound. And this is because you are using the back of your tongue and kind of forcing it upwards a little bit to create that pressure. And you've come across these sounds already in English. A dental sound in English is the TH sound at the start of the word the. So the, it uses your teeth. And a velar sound, not velarized, but velar anyway, is something like the Irish or English G, for example, guh, guh, guh. You're actually using the velum, basically the back part of your, upper back palate or something. Someone can correct me on that to make the sound. So guh, guh, they all use that back part of your mouth. So that's the kind of distinction. So for the G, for example, that's called a velar consonant. They say basically, technically, the primary point of articulation is the velum. Whereas for that L sound, the primary point was at the tip of your tongue against your teeth. The secondary point, or the secondary thing you did with your tongue, was sort of have it kind of up at the back. So that's why it's called velarized, whereas the G is velar. And that's the kind of nerdy part of that over. So if you ever read this stuff again and you wonder what they're talking about, that's what they're going on about, typically. The slender L, in order to make this sound, there's no direct analog to this in English, I don't think. There are sounds that sound a little bit like it. But I'd say, take any English D at the start of a word, or sorry, take the L. again, and start, pick a word like life or love, anywhere where the L's at the start of the word. So go la 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 la. And notice where your tongue is when you make that noise. It's technically an alveolar sound because you're using the tip of your tongue against the bit of, let's say, flesh just behind your upper teeth, which is called the alveolar ridge. So la 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 la. And what you want to do there is, so really think of the point where your tongue is tipping your mouth. You kind of always want to have one part of your tongue making contact to that point. So you're doing something like this, la 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 la, right? What you want to do is bring the tip of your tongue further towards your teeth, but you want to still have a part of your tongue against that la 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 point. So you almost like want to press your tongue like this all the way up until your front teeth. So you're doing something like this. But this point here where they're touching is where you're making the sound along with here. So just keep moving your tongue forward, almost like crawling along the roof of your mouth like a snake. So you go la 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 until you go la 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 la. If you want to, you can kind of spread your lips a bit as well. That's actually what's typically done by native Irish speakers to a degree. And that's taking the English sound, this light L versus the dark L we talked about before, and moving it to a more palatized sound. And it's called palatized because you're basically moving your tongue up into your palate to make the sound. And like once you can distinguish between these types of L's, you can pretty much make a ton of sounds in Irish with very, very little effort. So I'll pull up some examples and we'll try to go through them. Okay, so let's start with the L examples. We'll take these two words, okay, and we'll listen to them here. Okay, so the first word is
Lee.
Okay, and the second word is
Lee.
So even though it's a guy and a girl saying them, you can kind of hear the difference. This the first word,
Lee.
it almost has this like deeper sound, even though the vowel sound is kind of the same. So like how to make this again? So do the L, the L, and go to this E sound. So go Lee, Lee, right? So you can hear it kind of, it sounds more throaty, more deep. And then when you try the other sound,
Lee.
right, it's more like Lee, Lee, Lee. So it sounds a bit lighter, it sounds a bit more open. And like an interesting thing about the kind of palatized and velar sounds as well is it affects the vowels that kind of come before or after it. So even though the E is the same, the velar kind of makes it like more retracted in your mouth, whereas the palatal consonant makes it like more wider and sound a bit brighter. You'll see this everywhere in Irish as well. So like, I guess you could fairly say you kind of have like a broad and slender vowel sound depending on where it is in the word and what's beside it. But like once you get a little bit better at this and a bit more practiced, you won't think about this as much. You'll naturally make these sounds. You'll find it a little bit easier. So that's the first example. Second example, let's take D. And you're doing the exact same thing with your mouth as you are doing with the L. So instead of the l, start with that sound, l, go do 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 do. Exact same thing. With the D sound though, you can typically force a bit more air through it, so be like do do, and you can let's say like round your lips a little bit more, almost kind of like pouty. Same with the L. Actually, you can do that too. It just depends on the particular dialect you're trying to sound like. They kind of all do a certain degree of this more flat to more rounded mouth position. So with the D, we'll take this word,
The.
and then we take this word,
D.
and you can hear the difference again. The velar sound sounds a little bit further back in your throat, a little bit darker, and the palatal sound sounds a little bit brighter, a little bit wider. And so like, okay, so if I tried, so like take the l, put a D in there, do, and go to the E sound, so the. And when you really exaggerate it, you hear this kind of glide sound. It's almost like this kind of coming up between the D and the vowel sound. And to bring it back to this whole B versus bui thing I talked about at the start, like that glide, that kind of W sound that comes in there, it's actually a consequence of the consonant to the vowel shift itself. It's not something you need to actually think about. When you get these consonant sounds and vowel sounds correct, you'll nail this glide automatically. Or if you find something's a bit hard to pronounce, it's probably because you need to introduce the glide yourself. But we'll get that in another video as well. Okay, so that's the broad D. Now if you want to do the palatal D, so again, set yourself up with the la 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 la, so and kind of widen your lips out a little bit, so la 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 la, and yeah, basically throw a D in there, so go D D D
D,
and that's your palatal D sound. Next after the D, we'll go for a T sound. Exactly the same thing again, Absolutely no different than before. So what you want to do is set up your L, and just instead of making a D or an L, make a T out of it, and just again you can shove a bunch of air through this as well, especially towards the start of a word. So go to 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 to, right, and then force a bit more air, to to to, and yeah, and I couldn't get audio for this word, but I'll give it a go myself. So it's a tui, right? It's almost like you hear that glide there as well. And then the word for a house, and this is your palatal version. So get the light L, palatize it like we did, and make it a T sound. So T, T, T.
T.
There you go. Sorry, I said it's a word for a house. It's the genitive, but like it doesn't really matter. Next example, we'll go for N. Same thing again. I've been playing the Munster sound so far, but this one's a better example. If you play it the Connacht sound, the Connacht dialect. So if we go for the word for 9,
Naoi.
mli. So the same thing again. Mli, right? Mli.
Naoi.
And then the word for like no, or it also means a thing.
Ni.
Same thing again. Basically, take your palatal L, make an N out of it, ni, and that's your sound difference. So ni. So you'll really hear the difference. It's one of them sounds a little bit deeper, and one of them sounds a little bit lighter and a little bit higher. So the reason I wouldn't do the Munster sound there is because I suppose it really should be spelled Nao instead of Naoi. So Munster they say lay instead of lee.
Naoi.
Right, so you don't get that kind of glidey sound. I want to talk as well about the pure velar sounds. So when you have C and G, for example, to make the C sounds broad versus slender, you'll be able to do this pretty straightforwardly. So take an English C, for example. Let's go k, right? Like cat, k, say the sound. To do the broad C, you just kind of make it further back in your throat. So k. And again, you can do the lip rounding a bit as well. So if you want to take a word like clean. This is better in Munster again because the MH isn't actually pronounced, whereas in Connacht and above it's cuimhin, or I think it's like a V sound. So clean, because you're going from this broad C sound to this slender N sound. So n at the end and an E in the middle. Clean. So you'll notice there, I'm not saying a W sound at all. So like when I see people try this out, they kind of go queen, as in like the English word Queen, but you don't need to. And you'll see my lips don't make the W sound. They don't go whoa, right? They go clean. It's all throaty. You know, it's your tongue basically moving, and your throat kind of moving around it. Same thing again for the slender C sound. So to start with your English C, k, pronounce it further forward in your mouth. K. I almost say the word ki, like Kit Kat. Ki. That's your slender C. And then a good example, the same kind of vowel sound. So the k to the n, the k to the n is keen, which means means head, for example, or ones, as in those ones, right? This example doesn't really work if you want to sound like you're from Cork either. So I think in the Cork version of Munster, it's keen. Then go for the G sounds as well. Let's go for the broad G. So start with your English G. Go. Same thing as you did with the C. Pronounce it further back in your throat. Go. And you can kind of round your lips as well if you want to. So go. So we'll go for the word, this word here.
Gall.
And yeah, so it's gall. And you notice here in this one, it's almost like the L isn't as pronounced, which is kind of what the English do in some dialects when they pronounce this kind of velar L. So you're still doing the same kind of thing. You're just not really contacting your tongue with your teeth as much. This sometimes happens. You'll notice it very clearly when you hear the word. You'll kind of hear this L sound that sounds a bit deep, with something you'll kind of tweak your ear when you hear it. And then for your slender G, same thing as you did with the C, pronounce it further forward in your throat. So g. Yeah, I almost say like Kit Kat with a G. So g. What you want to do then is, let's say the word
Geall.
so you start with the g and you want to go to the l at the end, right? So you go gall. And you notice there for this one, you kind of get this glidey Y sound as well. So basically, you get these glides as a natural consequence of moving from these velar sounds, these kind of openy vowel sounds at the front of your mouth, or vice versa, from a palatized sound to a kind of a more throaty sound. This is how they kind of come up. Yeah, so some general tips is like, one, kind of go through these words, listen to them, listen for the broad and slender sounds. You should have a better idea now how to pick them up. Practice them as best you can, and when you practice, don't worry about overdoing the sound. I'm only overdoing this now so you can really hear the difference or know what to do with your mouth. Like, certainly native speakers don't overdo it, but when you hear them, you'll kind of hear this quality in how they talk, right? You'll hear this quality in how they say the words. And if you're watching other materials or reading, like, let's say some articles on the topic, just like watch out. Oftentimes these people are very well meaning, but they kind of, I suppose when you read about something, it's very different to it in practice. I found a lot of people, they might learn Irish and they think they're learning it, but then they actually hear someone speak and they go, what is that? It's because they've never heard the sounds before, and when they speak it, they don't know how to make them because no one's ever told them. Because it's really hard to explain. It's hard to get. And yeah, I got a video I really want to recommend on this. This guy's probably got the only, let's say, video I've ever seen that covers the topic in full. I just wanted to add this video to give some extra tips around, how I managed to pronounce the words better, particularly that L sound, starting from the sound I knew in English. So yeah, like, subscribe, watch the video I recommended, and watch this space.